Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome to the show Mikel Guillen, who is a Toronto-based film artist, writer, cinematographer, designer, conceptual artist, film translator, anarchist poet, and film curator. He does it all. Mikel, welcome. It's great to finally have you.
Thank you. Yeah, it took us a year and a half. Yes.
It took a while, but we made it. I know we've been discussing this for a while. Correct. So I'm glad that we finally have an episode dedicated to experimental and avant-garde cinema, which I am certainly no expert on, which is, partly why I'm bringing you in. So I'm just curious, when people hear avant-garde, I wonder if people necessarily know what that means. Like, what does it mean to you for something to be an avant-garde film?
To me, the word avant-garde is a word that comes from the military perspective, because the avant-garde are usually the forces that are in front of the target, or in front of what they're aiming for, and the rear guard, or the part that is behind, is not avant-garde. Now, the term comes from being ahead of their time, or being completely unrelated to current events, or unrelated to film practices, artistic practices, and so on, is a term that has been, to a degree, criticized, mocked, laughed at. But the avant-garde, the actual last avant-gardes ended around the end of the 80s. Right now is, curators in Europe and the world call it post-avant-garde, if they have the guts, because all these labels are coming from academia and from the contemporary art world, basically.
And wasn't it Andre Bazin, who actually coined the phrase avant-garde film?
Yes, it's one of them. All the people that in my view are truly avant-garde, at least in French films, are part of the world of that era, which is the Impressionist. Right. The Jean Epstein, the Jean Vigo, the Marcel L'Herbier, all these people because they have nothing behind them, so they created everything. When you see movies like The House of Usher by Jean Epstein, or you see La Talente by Jean Vigo, they were really ahead of their time. It's right. Not like, for the last 50 years, we've been, at least in the Western world, we've been told that the new wave, the French new wave of the late 50s and early 60s was everything. But in my view, the real avant-garde of the French were these people that did films with nothing, and were able to create very poetic films.
What was it about the avant-garde films that interested you to make avant-garde experimental movies?
It was just I came later in my life as a filmmaker. I used to work in many fields, all creative, but 25 years ago I decided to become a director and start making films, and then suddenly, and little by little, I was, challenging, channeling and meeting people that were very interested in these practices. And that's how, 15, 16 years ago, I met a bunch of people that were part of the Remodernist Film Manifesto. And out of that group, I also met Scott Barley, who became our part of the collective that we have now. But that's how, little by little, it became, because when we were invited to be part of the Remodernist Manifesto, which was a very pretentious as a classic manifesto of anything. It was to try to find a new spirituality in film using 8mm film cameras and finding ways to sort of enhance the spiritual take by following certain techniques and certain schools of Japanese melancholia, like the wabi-sabi and the mono no aware and things like that. But that's how the whole thing started. And then in my view, there's a huge difference in between avant-garde and experimental. But that's a set of sort of like a discussion in Canada and in North America, because for us in Europe is very different. It's very clear the difference, right? And not too long ago, I had a conversation with Mikel Guillen, which is a filmmaker, and then we both agree that if you show an avant-garde film to any of these experimental film circuits, they will see you as a madman from Mars, right? So avant-garde, yes, avant-garde has nothing to do with what they're doing right now, and usually is very demanding, is very shocking, or it could be something that is really new that takes you away, or speaks you away. That's why people leave screenings, right? Because they can't take it, right?
Right. So what's interesting is you say that there is a difference between avant-garde and experimental?
To me, there is, and the reason why is because if you take a look at the experimental works for the last 20 years, at least in the Western world, there's a consensus that there's sort of like an interest in the past from formats, meaning the way the 16mm is used, the 8mm is used, even 35. But there's a sense of the past, and there's a sense of the melancholy of the past. And when you see an avant-garde film, or there's a lot of experimental filmmakers now that they have done, to a degree, an avant-garde film without wanting to do one, because it's so new. The ideas are new, the concepts are new, and you can see the difference, the results when you see the film on screen, and people start reacting.
Mm-hmm. Would avant-garde perhaps be something a little more abstract as opposed to experimental?
It could be because interesting that you mentioned that, because in experimental right now and for forever, experimental abstractism is being the main core, because the original experimentalists from the 40s and 50s and 60s did a lot of abstraction, from paintings, from flowers, from colors, from images to create. That's why a lot of these artists they like to call themselves moving image artists, because they're basically moving an image in an abstract way. Yeah. And that's why when I think of an experimental film, I think of the blossoming of a rose in 16mm mirrors for 25 minutes, super slow opening, right? And that has been done for the last 40 years, So that's why I'm saying that the experimental, I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying that there's a huge interest in the past and how the past was remembered and how it's reshaped and how it's retaken. And also there's a lot of festivals and labs and people who are very invested in this kind of melancholy and nostalgia about the past. And yes, in some ways it can lead to create something new, but that new for at least for me, in most cases, represent a clear influence from the past, and that breaks completely the dialogue for me, right? So it becomes boring because it's something that it reminds you of the past instead of looking to be shocked and to be shaken by a thought-provoking new idea, right?
I see.
And there's a lot of politics about all these festivals that they don't want to think outside of the box, that they don't want to do or want to accept films that are really avant-garde, that are really controversial, or they are really, it's not necessarily that they have to be controversial, but they have to be thought-provoking by how the idea is, what is the idea about, and how that idea is presented, projected, created, and so on,
So now for people who are maybe less familiar with avant-garde or experimental cinema, what are some examples that you think people right away would know that are a little easier to know that would be considered avant-garde?
Well, I'm sure that you know that experimental and avant-garde films are usually for a minority of people, from the makers to the people who actually see these works. Right, because it's not commercial, because it's not talked about. It's like how many people you know that they are into avant-garde poetry. I know like 3.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to say. That, but there are even in the commercial world there are examples of films that. To a certain degree, have avant-garde components at the same time. And I'll give you an example. If you take a look at The Pianist by Michael Haneke, 2001, that is to a degree to a degree an avant-garde film in a major commercial scale, because that's why Haneke was and is a visionary in my view, right? Because it's truly a new way of dramatizing drama. And, because I'm sure that you've seen people, or you talk to people that they will tell you that, in cinema, everything has been done. And I don't think that's the case. And there are many filmmakers around the world, not only Haneke, that can prove us wrong, that, there's so many things to do and show, because to me, cinema is not about, telling stories, I think that idea of telling stories, at least from an experimental avant-garde position, is a no-go, because cinema is way more than just telling stories, even in a fictional way, right?
Would you consider, because I know you sent me some links to read up on avant-garde cinema. One of them that you sent, one of the filmmakers I talked about was Lynch, who recently passed away. So like Eraserhead, for example, his first film, which is like so weird and so creepy, but yet has this sense of humor about it. But is sort of like this gothic. It's got like these gothic horror and surrealistic qualities, but yet all of these images are abstract. I mean, in my view, and so the audience has to interpret them in their own way. And I know he didn't even like to talk about his movies. Would you consider him someone that maybe not in the commercial world, but let's say even in the cinephile world would be familiar with in terms of abstract?
Oh, absolutely. The reason why I'm saying that is because to me, you have to also remember and put things in perspective. He comes from a painter background, right? And if you take a look at his paintings from the 70s till now, they're all very abstract. So that's one thing. Second thing is, to me, David Lynch is the most successful avant-garde filmmaker ever. And I'm not saying that because he passed away. I've always said it because he was able to create a unique world and be successful at it, because most avant-garde filmmakers can hardly survive, including me. So it's very difficult because, first of all, nobody cares. That's one. Very few people care. And the people who don't care is because they have already been professed eternal loyalty to Hollywood and to commercial films. Right. So, and the problem with that is what Luis Buñuel used to say, that in the end, Hollywood films can, to a degree, rape you, because it will only allow you to see what you've seen before.
Right. In one way.
And when you've seen something else, it's not, it's not the same effect, or you reject that idea, and I think it's very difficult. Now, You have to also remember that what I find interesting about David Lynch is that he creates this Eraserhead in '77, and then by '80 he was doing The Elephant Man.
Yeah,
with what's the name of this British actor?
John Hurt.
John Hurt.
And Anthony Hopkins as well.
And Anthony Hopkins, which is literally a Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And then from then in '80, he goes to '84 or 83, 84 with Dune. An unbelievable. So he goes, as you can see, periodically from very little to medium to huge, and all at the same time being extremely weird. In an America of the late '70s, early '80s, which was, coming from America in the late '70s means that they used to care for creativity more than what they do now, right? That's probably why Mel Brooks, was able to finance Eraserhead and was able to, I'm sure, to recommend this guy to the big leagues, to do The Elephant Man.
Right. It's interesting because I saw Eraserhead almost 20 years ago, and when I was too young to really be able to get into something like that. Well, not to say that someone young maybe wouldn't, but at least I shouldn't just point to youth. It was just my taste at the time. But I watched it again, and even though I found it really creepy, but I was still really enjoying it. And what I appreciated was that, he doesn't make anything easy, and he's not telling you, why is this baby an alien? Why are the parents of this guy's girlfriend acting so weird? And it's all so surreal. And so you have to sort of make up your own mind. And for me, I mean, I think he was getting at something about when you become a father that people don't like to talk about, or a parent in general, which is the sleep deprivation. The mother and the father at each other's throats as a result of that, and other things. And then looking at this newborn who is this, what do you do with them? It seems like such a foreign object, like I'm responsible for this. And so it's so much more about a feeling. I guess to him it felt like like now he has a creature, right? Or now he has an alien and all the feelings that go with it, I mean, in his case, these feelings of wanting to die, wanting to throw the baby out the window, and people say those kind of things, right? It's like, oh my God, the baby was crying all night, I wanted to throw him out the window. No one would do that unless you're insane, But he's getting at a feeling as opposed to necessary. I mean, there's a story, but it's more about getting to the feelings about a certain reality. I mean, was that your experience of that film?
To a degree, it is, but at the same time, looking back in retrospective, he was, and he would forever be, for me at least, a surrealist. So everything is about dreams.
Yes.
Right. So if you take a look at the film, I mean, I watched Eraserhead when I was 19, and then I watched it again not too long ago, and it still holds for me. Absolutely. Because he creates a mood of a temporal mood that you don't know when it was made, and so it's just a fascinating piece of contemporary art, in my opinion, right? But at the same time, I was watching or rewatching Blue Velvet for my podcast, and there are many shots that are done in 60 frames per second, right? Which means that it feels like a dream. It's slowed down completely, and it feels like you are in a dream. So yes, in that sense, he will be not only an avant-garde because he's ahead of his time and he's creator of a unique world, but that world is a world of dreams and violence and sex and all the things that are, to a degree, part of our psyche, if you want.
What is so? It's interesting because he's, very much connected to surrealism. Louis Buñuel, who you mentioned, is someone else people consider or say he's an avant-garde filmmaker. would the connection with surrealism and avant-garde be because that's like an expression of a totally different way of doing something, which is away from anything conventional? Or is there a different connection between it? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, whoever wants to do something surreal at this stage of age, at least, or at least always, you have to have a lot of guts to create a world that is based on things that are oniric or that are based on ideas that are inspired by dreams, which it takes a lot of guts. So you have to have not only a very strong artistic value, but if you see, all his dreams were very disturbing. But when you hear the interviews, he's a lovely man.
Yeah, he totally is. Yeah,
right. But all his characters are despicable, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Frank Booth and Isabella Rossellini and all these people are, well, Isabella Rossellini not so much, but Frank Booth and all these weird characters. Yes, yeah, and Kyle MacLachlan, who basically is, to a degree, this might sound controversial, but he's basically David Lynch.
Yeah,
right. Because he's basically Blue Velvet. He's talking about, his youth, in Midwestern America, which it doesn't get more boring and more white and more, vanilla than that.
Right.
And that's why it's so powerful, that within that vanilla world, there's a world of deprivation and perversion, which is fantastic. Right.
Well, yeah, because I heard him say, because he was grew up in that kind of world and where everything looks so beautiful. But he said something like, but somewhere on a tree there's an apple rotting with worms coming out of it, and so there's always something lurking behind the doors, right? That is just disturbing to him or creepy.
Right, and well, two things for that is that if you take a look at the famous references on surrealism by Man Ray, there's I think one or two hands with a lot of ants, which is pretty much what he's saying about the worms in the apple and rotting and all that part, which is very surrealistic. And then the second thing is that he said many times that he found Philadelphia being one of the most disturbing places on earth, because there were a lot of factories and a lot of really weird places where things can happen. He actually has a series of photographs in Philadelphia of all these factories that are looking very eerie and disturbing in black and white.
Right. So, yeah, it's interesting because there's other filmmakers that sort of pop out to me that perhaps may be considered like abstract. Was I know I messaged you about it because I recently rewatched 2001: Space Odyssey, and I couldn't help but wonder. Well, this seems to be abstract to me. I mean, would that be considered avant-garde? Not, sorry, I'm saying abstract. I meant avant-garde. Would that be something considered avant-garde, even though it was quite commercial? And
yes, no, I the reason why it was, with obviously taking our differences and not only differences, but our gaze. You have to remember that this movie was presented in 1968. Right. For 1968, yes, it was avant-garde because nobody has seen a movie made like that at that time.
Right, especially by Warner Brothers.
Exactly. And the fact that they allowed this guy to do something so demanding and so philosophical and so unbelievably achieved was amazing, and for that idea, in my view, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will agree, the undertaking of that film at that time was an avant-garde idea.
Well, I want to talk about some of your films as well as Scott Barley.
Sure.
So I watched a number of them, and I really liked all of them. But the one I wanted to start with a tonal, which I mean, I love the way it starts with the back of this guy's head. And these really creaky noises and these disturbing sounds. and then as he's taking steps forward, you suddenly see that he's in a place of nature, and the noises go away. And so if and then you see him at home, and his view is like these like apartment buildings. So to me, I took I took it as that this man, or perhaps you could say even largely it's society, that or in his case that he was struggling to function within the man-made world, but nature, which is the pure, a place of purity and spirituality, is where he feels the most in touch with nature and humanity. Was that the intent or of that film?
Well, the intent, if we're going to dissect the film, yes. And the reason why the sounds stop when he's walking is because if you don't walk, if you are still, you will be able to perceive sounds in a different way than if you're walking. That's one. Second, he sees himself as someone who's questioning his dilemma of not being over-sexualized by society. And the only place where him and many people are able to confide in a pure way, where everybody's accepted and everybody is to a degree loved and understood by this spiritual idea of God or the universe, is nature. So to me, the fact that it's in front of that tree is obviously an intent of understanding life, meaning the power of where do we come from and who are we, and then he goes inside and then he's sleeping, right?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, because one thing, nature plays like a big part in a number of your films. So what is it? Because even we didn't get to it yet, but we will. Scott Barley's film "Sleep Has Her House," which is completely in nature, the whole film. What is it about nature that interests you?
Well, I think it's a clear mystery to me. Meaning, well, it's not a clear. Well, that's an oxymoron. But what I'm saying is that, no, it's a mystery, and nature has many layers of possible understanding from a spiritual point of view, in my view, right? So, that's why I think it's in many of my films, because I believe that my intentions are spiritual, or at least trying to dwell and swim inside of a world that might reveal something about us. Because to me, cinema is something that it will reveal, or it can reveal the spirituality of our. Because in the end, is what Bruno Dumont used to say. It's about cinema is about revealing the possibility that there's an understanding of that mystery. That's why it's all these perfect scripts and perfect performances and all that remove themselves from, in my view at least, from a deeper connection. And I think cinema can bring us that deeper connection if it's done in that intention and with that expertise, or with that intention.
Well, Sleep Has Her House is also like I said. I mean, it completely is a film about nature by Scott Barley, and some of those images. I mean, it's beautifully photographed, and as you told me, he shot it on an iPhone. I mean, it looks like paintings often. I mean, it's so incredible. But I love how he'll have a shot of a beautiful sunny day in nature, and then you're observing it for a while, and then before you know it, it gets dark, starts to rain, and then this thunder begins, And it's amazing that he caught that in real time. And this is not something he did for anyone watching in post with this is all shot as it was unfolding. And so to me, all of these various things you see in nature is that nature could be beautiful, but it also could be terrifying. It could be calming. It could make you feel peaceful, but it could also be scary. I mean, it just goes through. I don't think I can only speak for myself, but I don't necessarily think about those feelings from nature consciously, or those our own relationships with nature. But here we have this incredible film, which is purely about listening to the sounds and looking at the landscapes, and then taking to it as you want to. I mean, now I know that these are open to interpretation, but is that how you see this film as well, or do you see it in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I remember the first time that I saw it, and it blew me away. It's all the layers of philosophy, mystery, phenomenology, cosmology, all these unbelievably amazing moments, and how these can be part of a concerto of mystery with the animals.
Yes.
All these images with sound and what a music, what powerful music is. It's a masterpiece. It's an unbelievably amazing film. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and I agree also that some of the images look like paintings.
Yeah. And I know that you did a film with him, which is also The Sadness of the Trees. That was the one with him, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that similar in the sense that, in that one, when we see nature, my impression was you were both showing the different sides of it. Like at one point, this blue tint, and so I'm trying to put it into words, but the image, it was I imagine those were more calculated. Perspectives and what you did with the camera, and so at times you're showing again all of these different moods of natures and feelings, and I found it really both terrifying and peaceful. But whereas with Sleep Has Her House, I'm not sure what he knew he was going to find shooting those things, or if he was just open to see what he was going to discover. But it seemed more observational as opposed to The Sadness of the Trees, which was more of a calculated perspective. I hope that makes sense. If that makes sense.
Well, when it comes to that, that would be a question for Scott. But I think,
of course,
I truly think that I'm assuming that those images were there when he was there, and this is what nature gave him, which is unbelievably powerful. In my view.
Exactly.
Now, when it comes to The Sadness of the Trees. These are two very different perspectives, but at the same time, I truly believe and I truly think that they work together really well. The film got so many awards and screenings around the world, but you are absolutely right about changing the mood of the tree. The trees, because in the end, our main goal is to let the audience know that trees actually can see our decay as human beings. They're the witness of our decay. And I find that absolutely powerful, to say the least, right? So that's why I think it's a very well achieved film. And now we're about to launch the new collaboration after many, many, many moons called The Emerald Fire. And it's about, it's about the seven veils of Islam, of Sufism, which is the spiritual branch of Islam. And it's all about ascension and how, again, within nature, we can ascend, So, but yeah, that would be the answer to your question, Robert.
Mm-hmm. And Nessia is a film that that was your latest film short. Am I right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So again, this explores the Holocaust, and so my interpretation here is because we see these images from the camps, and then voiceover from someone who was there, and then talking about her granddaughter, and then we see the granddaughter doing this beautiful dance. And to me, I thought I was interpreting it that this trauma from the Holocaust is inherited, the kids and the grandkids, that then gets passed on and inherited. And so by the time we get to the dance, this young woman is basically has taken that into her body from the time she was born, and is now expressing it artistically and poetically through. Was that the intent, or is that just how I see it?
That was completely the intent. No, you got it. You're absolutely 100%, and I'm really happy about that. The main reason why is because originally this project took around in between 7 to 9 years to be made. And the main reason why, it's a long time. The main reason why is because originally was going to be a film for galleries and museums, like most of my work, but at the same time, it was going to be in between two Jewish museums, one in Europe and one in LA. At that time, I just finished The Sadness of the Trees and I filmed my section with a drone when we're talking about 10 years ago. The reason why I mentioned that is because the idea of representing this trauma and how the trauma travels was going to be presented on real time in these two museums in all formats, from 8 millimeters to VR and drones. So imagine inside of the Daniel Libeskind Museum in Germany, the two drones flying inside slowly, documenting everything in real time. It would have been too controversial and too ahead of its time. And obviously we were shut down because there's always construction in all these museums in Europe. And at the end, we got some money from the grants here, and we were able to do it. But it's a choreography that took many years, and I will be forever grateful for Dave Wilson, the master choreographer, and Laura Runions, the dancer, and Viv Moore, who was part of the production team, and Nick Storin, the one that created the amazing music. So I was sold, and that's why I started winning all these awards in the beginning, and we're still sending it to festivals.
Oh, great! Yeah, no, I found it really moving. I mean, I thought it was. Because there's a lot of Holocaust movies and or the effects of the Holocaust, exploring that, and there's a number I like, but I hadn't seen one done like this. I mean, this, again, like you were saying, it's avant-garde, right? It's another way of doing it.
Right, and the other thing that I've never seen in a Holocaust film, which was inspiration, was this idea that Jews that were in Auschwitz were actually doing all these plays and all these artistic things when the SS guards, the Himmlers and all these people were actually getting drunk. So so just imagine Auschwitz and the guards getting drunk, and while these guys are completely wasted, all these Jews are creating this amazing place to keep the faith alive. And I think one of the main inspirations is that the artistic soul walks alongside the trauma in this case. So the same way that Jews are thinking that or feeling that the Holocaust happened yesterday. If you go to Gettysburg in New York, from a Hasidic point of view, but most sections of Judaism have dealt with the Holocaust in different ways. But these are real trauma that happen through generations. So what you're saying is absolutely truthful. You know, and I wanted to convey that the fact that she is actually dancing with all the pain from generations that is going through. You know, by growing up with her grandma, by living a Jewish life, by living the pain and the sadness and the sorrow that it is within us. You know,
what one could even interpret something like JEANNE DIELMAN, the Chantal Akerman film, has because I can't help but wonder if she is also getting at inherited trauma. That character has so much anxiety and this need for control, and if she loses any of her control every single day from every single chore, and she has a moment to herself, you see that she is anxious to be in her own body. And I can't help but wonder if Akerman, if that was also the intent from her perspective, that she was getting at something about inherited trauma.
That is a very interesting comment, because Akerman was always very vocal about being a Jew, about suffering from anti-Semitism. But I find JEANNE DIELMAN basically an homage to female strength and female, standing off to the man. That's why the film became basically a flag for feminists of all ages, right? But I agree the fact that so much that I don't know if you know this, but when she last screened her last film, people booed at her mom, and people have said that that was one of the reasons why she killed herself. Right?
Really?
So, yes.
Wow.
So
I still haven't seen that. Is it No Home Movie? I forget what it's called now.
I think that's the one. That's the one. Yes.
I've been meaning to see it.
But she was truly an avant-garde. To me, Chantal Akerman is the second mother of the avant-garde, meaning being the first one being Maya Deren, right? But Chantal Akerman was way too ahead of her time. She always hated labels, like being called a feminist, a gay filmmaker, a Jewish gay filmmaker, all these labels that people love to put on, you know?
Right, yeah. Yeah, she also didn't like messages. You know, she would say they're not message movies.
Correct. And this idea that at the time, she made basically a comment about the importance in between documentary filmmaking and fictional filmmaking, and for her, documentaries were also to a degree very fictionalized, which I agree. Because for me, all kinds of moving images with sound and music is cinema, including animation. Right?
Yeah. So, yeah, and even in a documentary, they're taking it from a certain perspective, whereas someone might say, "Oh, that's not true," or
correct.
Because what's necessarily true for one person or one filmmaker is not,
Exactly.
So to an extent, I think Scorsese said something along those lines as well. He didn't really see much of a difference.
Yeah, and but I do believe that there's a difference, and even though Scorsese was heavily criticized by Peter Greenaway for years for doing the same movie over and over, but obviously Greenaway was and still is a very avant-garde guy, right? So that's those are the references, and there are so many examples that unfortunately doesn't come to my head right now. But when it comes to the difference, I'll give you a clear example. Will be someone like Jonas Mekas, and he was in the beginning. He was really avant-garde because he was doing something that at that time nobody did. Right. Everybody did something close close to his films, 25, 30 years later, right? But that's what is interesting. Some experimentalists start as experimental, and then at their time, they are actually considered avant-garde because no one has ever done something like that. And the problem is that they influence so many people that their style becomes already something of the past.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to getting at. Because I don't believe it.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
One of the things that bother me about North America is that they think avant-garde and experimental practice are the same, and I don't believe that at all. There's a huge difference, and but I mean, I respect everybody, but I've seen works that are pretending to be avant-garde, and you also have to remember that not everything is good. Right, in experimental or avant-garde, the fact that it's avant-garde doesn't mean that it's actually good.
Of course. So
it has to be, which brings us to this idea that it's even less the percentage of high-quality avant-garde films in a pool of mediocrity. You know what I mean? Or in the same way for the experimental stuff, right?
I also loved, which I'd seen it before, is Meshes of the Afternoon.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely, that's a huge masterpiece.
That's that's so good. I mean, again, it's this surrealistic film which they shot in their house. Maya, Darren, and Alexander. Is it Hamid or Hamid?
Hamid, I think it's Hamid.
Yeah, and this kind of exploration of suicide or murder or death in this surreal. I mean, people could interpret it in their own ways, and again, it's those images of death with the mirror. The face is like a, and it's haunting. And I'd seen it before. Again, I probably you got to be in a certain mood for these films, which I think it may be important to mention, because my impression for people who are maybe used to commercial filmmaking, or even somewhat conventional narrative speaking, is that naturally when you're watching a movie, whether conventional or not. People much prefer to know exactly what's going on. And so if there's anything that may seem, experimental or avant-garde or makes them uncomfortable in the sense that now they don't know what's happening, they can then dismiss it and not want to see it. So I think it may be important to note, Mikel, I don't know how you feel, that when you're watching something like this, you got to shut the mind off. And if you don't worry if you don't understand something, it's just think about it later or not, but just look at it, just watch it and eliminate, just like one would with meditating. It's as they say, focus on the breath, and if you start to think, then acknowledge the thought, but then go back to the breath. I think anything avant-garde or challenging or experimental, I think that's the best way to do it, because things are they're not easy, right? So
absolutely. One thing that is very important to mention is that there's a common ground for avant-garde films that in a lot of cases, I'm not saying all the cases, but in a lot of cases there's a sense of disturbing. There's a sense of mystery. There's a sense of uneasiness. There's a sense, and that includes also my films. So, but these two films, meaning Meshes of the Afternoon, that was done in 1943, and I Walk with a Zombie by Jacques Tourneur. Those two films are one of Pedro Costa's favorite films ever. And the reason why is because they're so powerful and so avant-garde, but at the same time, they were done in 1943.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important to mention that, because Maya Deren in 1943, to me and to a lot of people, Yeah, she was the mother of the avant-garde. At the same time, the same way that Chantal Akerman became one, because of
Right.
all these films that are completely structuralist, right? Like
Mm.
JEANNE DIELMAN, like Hotel Monterey, like Views from Home, all these things that are really ahead of their time.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. Well, Mikel, if people want to follow you on social media or see what you're up to as a filmmaker, where can they go?
Well, they can go into mikelguillen.com. That's MIKELGUILLEN.com. They can Google me, or they can send me a message through the website, or they can contact you.
Yeah, they can.
I'm just joking. Yeah, those are the usual. But I think if they check the spelling again on the thumbnail of your podcast, they can just go from there.
Well, I'll leave the links in the description box for people to check out Mikel's website and follow him on social media. So, Mikel, thanks so much. It was great to have you, and to enlighten me and everyone more on avant-garde cinema.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And I'm sure you'll come back sometime soon and we'll talk some more.
Okay, anytime, my friend. Thank you again.
Okay, and everyone for watching, thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next one. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/RobertBellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation, or what I call a tip, by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide, and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.